Are you uncomfortable with silence? If so, maybe ask yourself why. What are you afraid of? Is it your own thoughts catching up with you? I think that this is true for so many people. And so I want to slow things down. I want to bring down the noise. This isn't going to be the video that's going to hook you with flashes and light and emotion. We're going to remain calm, and we're going to do a meditation of sorts, no pun intended, on the word silence, on the concept of stillness. So grab yourself a warm drink, sit back, and let's talk about this amazing but underrated and again, oftentimes terrifying notion of the quiet. Because before everything else, before there were words, there was silence. Before the first question, before the first prayer, before the first thought, there was the quiet. And on this channel so far, we've talked about some really important things. We've talked about knowledge and wisdom and reality and truth and light. But what if the most sacred of them all that we have lost is silence itself? The Greeks got it. They had this wonderful concept of stillness. The Japanese understood. They had ma, the space between. And over the course of my life, I have found it increasingly important. One of my great stress relievers in this life is to go solo hiking for days on end. Just me. And I make it a point not to speak, not to even make noise if possible, let alone to speak to anybody else. I try not to even see anyone else. And of course, there's still noise, there's still stimulation. But for my part, I've brought it in. Between that and a practice of mindfulness meditation, I know firsthand how important and life-giving this stillness is. And so I want to share that with you. So here's what we're going to do. Here's our agenda for today. I want to look at kind of the ancient idea of the sacredness of silence. Then I want to bump that up against the science of silence. It's more interesting than you might think. There's some paradoxes within the concept of silence I think will be fun to tease. We can look at some of the philosophical and ethical ideas around silence. Silence has been used as resistance. I think that's interesting. And at the end, we can talk about learning to listen. Again, just a few practical tips. But I think that this is important. I think it was important back for the very first Homo sapiens. But I think it's increasingly important. The louder that our world gets, the more needed the quiet is. And man, do we live in an age of noise. Not just sound itself, but stimulation. It is painfully loud how often our attention is trying to be robbed from us. That's one of the closest ties that I would put together with the concept of silence and stillness. It's attention. Silence is not just the absence of noise, it's presence and attention, the conditions that make true hearing possible. It's where reflection can happen, where growth occurs, where meaning is made. And in this modern day and age of the constant notifications, all the humming and buzzing of electricity all around us, the political outrage, the spiritual slogans, everyone vying for your attention, stealing it from you by adding in noise, which yes, I am part of, but at least mine comes with an admittance and hopefully at the end here, some encouragement for you to just take some time and be still and be quiet. So let's dive into this first point, kind of the ancient origins of sacred silence. We see it in myth and religion, which I probably need to do an episode on to differentiate between, because I've been using them a bit interchangeably, and that's not quite fair. But regardless, across cultures, silence has always been the precondition for the divine. I think that's really interesting to think about. I think there's so much wisdom, as much wisdom as man has been able to conjure up, they've put into their stories. The stories that make up myth and religion, the moral stories that act as warnings and encouragement. And time again, we see the importance of silence, of being still before something greater than yourself. Did you know that Pythagoras' disciples were made to be silent for 5 years before they could speak philosophy? The idea was for them to learn that wisdom starts with a listening. Socrates, who spoke often about his inner voice said it could only speak in moments of true quiet. We're starting with Greece, by the way, but we'll branch out. In Plato's Symposium, which again, there will be all books listed in the description and the spreadsheet, Diotima teaches that love leads to silence before the vision of the beautiful. I love that idea, that it leaves you speechless, right? Isn't that something interesting? We talk all the time about what takes your breath away, what leaves you speechless. Is it not always something beautiful, something lovely, something important, something awesome, sometimes even terrifying? Moving to some of the Eastern and mystical traditions, we can look at the Upanishads, where Brahman, ultimate reality, is described as neti neti, not this, not that, because words fail. It is silence that remains. One of my favorite concepts from the Tao Te Ching, which we mentioned a few episodes ago, is that the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. Again, the idea that the truest way can't even be described. Again, words fail. And if words fail, if noise fails, then what succeeds? Silence. In the Buddhist Zen tradition, what's the most famous sermon? Pop quiz. When the Buddha held up a flower and only one disciple smiled. I'm going to save that story though for another episode. But a wordless sermon is the one that sticks out so much. And again, how much I love the Japanese concept of ma, the space between. Maybe also because I adore Dave Matthews Band. But this is the pregnant pause that gives shape to sound, to movement, to time, to meaning, to everything. And then in some of the Jewish and Christian mysticism, there are some lovely concepts around silence. There's a lot in the Bible where God is very loud and boisterous, but one of the sweetest examples of God that we get is when it's time for him to reassure what is his most powerful prophet, Elijah, at least at that time. How did God choose to speak? In his typical whirlwind? No. Through fire? Through earthquake? No. He whispered in a still, small voice. Even in the Genesis account, we have the idea that before the words of creation, before it all happened, God was. This idea of the before is often contemplated as this eternal, infinite, holy presence alone, perfect stillness before the chaos of creation. All through the scriptures, we see these patriarchs, these desert fathers, go to seek silence so that what? They can properly hear. They can properly discern. They had to remove themselves from the noise, the stimulation, the ordinary, to be able to reach here and achieve the divine. Thomas Merton has this amazing quote that silence is the language of God and all else is poor translation. And then the last thing I'll say here on the Christian side, the Christian mysticism has this term, the cloud of unknowing. The idea that God can only be approached through love and silence, specifically not knowledge. Again, there's some critiques I could make there, but I think it's interesting to see how people have associated silence, love, purity, divinity together. Let's move to the science of silence. What have we been able to actually learn? What can we observe about this phenomenon? It's so fun to me when modern neuroscience, and in this case, some acoustic ecology, mirror or find out or prove what many mystics of the past had always speculated. And one of those understandings is that silence is not emptiness. That's not the same thing. It's contact. It's awareness, which is full. It's contact with your actual self, both metaphorically, like kind of internally, but also truly physically. Contact with your body, with your senses, the raw signal of being alive, right? Because people always think of death is that emptiness, that stillness, that quiet, that perfect long nap. No, death is the ceasing of existence. There is nothing. There is no experience. It is only when we are alive that we get to experience stillness. Stillness is vitality, not death. That's gorgeous. In 2013, a team of neuroscientists discovered something really cool about silence. 2 hours a day of silence, which is a tall order, by the way, led to increased growth in the hippocampus, the region of the brain that is tied to memory, emotion, and learning. In other words, silence literally grows the parts of the mind that noise erodes. It's healing. It's returning you. Chronic noise, by contrast, whether it is traffic or construction, the constant chatter around you, floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol, the stress hormone, and adrenaline, what keeps us in constant flight or fight. It raises blood pressure, it increases stress hormones, and it impairs attention and creativity. Now, noise is obviously necessary, but in terms of our well-being, noise is the enemy. So it's not that we should seek to not be in noise. We need noise, we need community, we need work, we need the noise that happens when we create. But to do all of those things effectively, it's also recognized that we need the stillness, we need the silence, we need the contrast. Silence does not merely calm you, it truly repairs you. Judson Brewer, who is a neuroscientist that studies silence, has this wonderful quote that silence is the reset button of our nervous system. But we can go further. There's some really interesting physiology going on with silence. When we sit in true quiet, the noise we hear is ourself. I don't know if you've seen the videos where they put people in a quiet room where sound is just fully absorbed. In this environment, people could literally hear their own heart beating. They could hear the stillness, however faint, of their breath. They could truly identify the rush of blood going to the ears. Now, oftentimes that's paired with just a total lack of stimulation, sometimes turning out the lights as well, nothing to see visually, beige walls, and eventually that can have hard, difficult effects on the human body, but also typically just because we're not used to it. We have a stress response to it, which I think only goes to show how needed more of it is in our daily lives. But generally, a few minutes in silence shows an uptick in relaxation and emotional regulation. In silence, we know this scientifically, the body shifts from utilizing the sympathetic system to the parasympathetic system, from stress to rest. That physiological change that can be seen and monitored, repeated and tested against, is the modern version of what all of those monks and mystics were onto, the peace of stillness. I mentioned the term acoustic ecology, which is something I only learned about when researching for this episode, but there's an acoustic ecologist, Gordon Hempton, someone who went to record before it's too late, the world's last naturally silent spaces. And after everything he did, he has this amazing idea about silence, a sad one, but an intriguing one, that silence is an endangered species. Hempton, who is apparently very good with words, also has another quote that I really fell in love with as I was reading about him, that silence is not the absence of something, it's the presence of everything. Oof, love that. There's other really fascinating considerations with the ecology tie-in to silence, like how animals are dependent off of silence to be able to detect predators or mates. And so as noise pollution has increased, birds have stopped singing, whales have lost communication ranges. Like, there's this entire breakdown to what was our natural world, which of course that's true. We've changed things, but seeing that change in silence is something I'd never really considered before. Then also on the science side, there's all of this psychological and creative insight. You've probably heard, if you want to get people's attention when you're public speaking, just for a moment, let that sit. Insert a pause, because silence is so unique to us now that when it happens, we listen. Did you know our prefrontal cortex cannot settle, for lack of a better term, unless it's silent? That's what frees up all the associated regions to make connections. And it explains why we have these brilliant insights when we're in bed at night and it's quiet and everything is off. Our mind is always rehearsing. We're always in the middle of the next conversation, the next thought. When is it my turn to speak? What will I do or say next? What needs to get done here or there? But in silence, the mind stops rehearsing and begins revealing. So if you're creative, if you are needing that muse, that spark of inspiration, it's not in many of the places you've probably searched. It's in just the calm and the still. So that's kind of the science, and included in that was some of the paradoxical ideas about silence, that it's not empty, it's really something rather full, and that yes, we're talking about all of these positives to silence, but I opened with the potential negative, because silence can also terrify us. When it removes those distractions for us, we're left with just ourselves, and many of us are deeply uncomfortable with that. And that's so very sad to me. In silence, we lose our masks. You have to get real. You have to be honest. It's like looking in a mirror. Learning to be content with who we are, it's a whole nother episode, so just pointing that out for now. But in general, there is this double-edged idea of silence. Yes, that mystical, divine presence idea. But there's also the existential concept of silence as the void. And again, under that negative framing, that in the void, when it's just us, when the monster we have to fight is ourself, man, that's when things get scary. In fact, it was Pascal who wrote an amazing concept on the importance of being able to face yourself in that void, in that mirror, in that quiet, without the mask. As he quite boldly states that all of man's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly with himself. I think there might be some truth to that. Someone who really drove this point home was John Cage, who made a silent symphony. It's called 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And in the original version, it is a man who sits down at a piano and then 4 minutes and 33 seconds pass. But it can be done with any instrument. The audience just has to bear it. And the point that Cage is making is, again, that paradoxical idea that silence is actually quite loud. That only when we are forced into the silent do we hear fully, in this case, the nervous laughter, the coffee and the rustling of programs, the kicking on and off of the air conditioning unit. The music becomes the ambient sound itself. So we've started branching into a few of the philosophical ideas behind silence. I want to cover a few more. One of my favorite philosophers, where's the book? Wittgenstein, at the very end of this, has this quote about silence, whereof one cannot speak, therefore one must be silent. It's not about ignorance. For him there, it's about reverence. This idea that language has its limits, we can see it elsewhere with Heidegger, who expounds on the very concept of language so deeply and says that, yes, language is a house of being, but silence is its foundation. It was Rumi, that's who it was, who said that silence was the language of God, and all else is poor translation. Sorry, just came to me. Simeon Weil has another brilliant quote about silence and the divine. Absolute attention is what she calls the definition of prayer. Silence, then, to her, is a form of worship. And isn't that for so many, no matter what your religion is or lack thereof? Do you truly understand? Do you see the quiet, the bowing of heads, the closing of hands to keep them still and quiet as a reverent thing to do? Is it how you commune with something bigger? Is it how you listen for something larger? Is it how you show that you are at attention? Again, it all works together so fascinatingly. And then as I was putting this together, I don't really have this well thought out, so I'm just going to kind of tease it. Play with it on your own if you want. But when I was thinking about some of the paradoxes of silence, I thought about the ethical paradox of silence. On one hand, silence is this moral thing, this thing that we can do to show others we are listening, that we care, that we want to hear them, not speak ourselves, that their ideas matter to us. That plus everything else I've said, it's clear that silence can heal, but it can also harm. What is the critique when we look at things like Nazi Germany? That not enough people spoke up. We didn't create enough noise about this. Whatever your ideas are about what's important, what is valuable, what is good, what is necessary, it so often requires us not being silent. So yes, silence can show that we're being present and paying attention, but it can also condone atrocities. Speaking on the Holocaust, it was Elie Wiesel who said that neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim, that silence encourages the tormentor. That's very true. And so I think it's important to A, find the balance, right? But B, understand the different kinds of silences. One silence is attentive. It is presence. And if you're being attentive and present and something horrible is going on, you know that. And ideally, you can take action. You can break the silence. You've already given it your attention. Your presence is here. It's time to utilize it versus the other kind of silence, the absent kind of silence, the scared kind of silence, the silence that is self-protecting only. One silence is so we can actually listen. The other is so that we can ignore. So again, not fully fleshed out, but something to consider. Nuance in everything. And I don't want to reopen it, but thinking about it, actually, again, paradoxically, silence is made for great resistance. Hevel called it the power of the powerless. Maybe that's the distinction there. If you can do something, you have a moral duty, perhaps, to speak up, to break the silence. But if you're absolutely powerless, then your silence is your fight. We saw that with Gandhi in his silent fasts. Silence is protest, as purification, as presence. This is us showing up. We see it with the Sufi mystics and the Buddhist monks. Maybe sometimes silence is the loudest form of truth. So, to kind of close out here with some practicality, what can I tell you about learning to listen again? One is just understanding, which hopefully this video has helped you with, to truly ground your idea of what silence is, where it can go wrong, where it can be beneficial, what it can do for you, what others have thought about it. Here it is. And yeah, I know I gave the example of the solo hiking and being silent, and if you can do that kind of thing, great. But in general, the power of silence is not about withdrawing from the world. It's about remaining present in it, despite the noise. Just do it. Sit in silence, not to empty your mind, but to notice it. Don't judge yourself. Don't worry about the hard thoughts or the stupid thoughts that come. Let them move by. We'll do a whole nother episode on mindfulness meditation at some point. But can you just be an observer of yourself for a little bit each day? Another place where I've learned it to be so important is before replying. And I don't always get this right. I can be reactive too. But man, have I learned the importance of just holding back for a minute. Before you reply, let silence fall. Doesn't take much. I mean, have you ever gotten a text and you just immediately start texting back? You're like, wait, like that half second is sometimes all you need to realize, no, this isn't going to be beneficial. When I'm having conversations with my friends or my children or my wife, taking a beat, a little pause when they're done speaking before I start is magical. Not as a game, but truly because I am not afraid to let them watch me absorb what has been said. I don't need to fill the empty space quickly. I want them to see, and I want the actual time to process, to hear, to be present. Listen for what isn't said, not just in your conversations, I mean in general. In music, like we talked about, it's actually the rest that creates the rhythm. In art, it's the negative space that makes the picture come to life. And in people, again, their pauses, that's where it's all at. That's what reveals what's important to them or what was painful to them. Pay attention. The goal is not always to remove yourself from all stimulation. It's more to remove yourself from distraction. Now we're just getting into practical life advice, but man, can you do a little bit of a fast, a little bit of a digital detox? 1 hour, 1 evening, 1 full day, per week, per month, whatever works for you. Can you let your brain hear itself again? One thing that was very interesting to me, it's anecdotal data, that's all I have here. I write a lot, I journal a lot, and I used to always want evoking music to help me feel more creative and inspired. But here's my personal tip. Write in silence. I don't care what you write or for how long, but what if it's truly just you, a paper and a pen? You'll notice right away how your sentence is slow. That's the other thing that's nice about pen and paper versus typing. It's slow. It forces you to consider every letter, every word, every sentence. You will see your ideas deepen, I promise. I think that's enough on the advice. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for giving me your attention and your presence. I hope that it has taught you the importance of these things and the ability to be able to do it more and better through the practice of silence and stillness. I hope that you'll find your own space between. I hope that you'll be intentional and craft it and create it for yourself. It will not happen on accident, not in today's day and age. You must claw it back from the world that so desperately wants you to hear every single possible thing. The most radical thing you can do in the face of that is actually learn to just listen, to be still, small, and silent. I'll see you Saturday with another video, and until then, keep sharing. I recently started a Patreon, and I'd encourage anyone to join if you would like to contribute to the mission of this channel. I wanted to give a special shout out to my first Blaze tier patron, James Geider. Thank you so much for the generous support. You'll see a few others on screen at the Flame tier, and then there's a few more who have already joined the Ember tier, which are listed in the description of this video. Please consider joining these fine people. Thanks, and have a great day.